So we have Lord of the Rings as a film trilogy, and if you've seen some of my other videos, you'll know that I'm a little bit mixed on what Peter Jackson did with Tolkien.
Be very careful with the next thing you say.
But we're not going to concentrate on that. We're going to look at the Two Towers video game, which was released a while back, but I still have pretty good memories of, and I can't say enough good things about it. I found it pretty enjoyable, and it has enough difficulty that it's challenging for both a novice and intermediate players. If you're a really, really good video game player, it's not going to be too much of a challenge. You're going to be able to get through the adventure pretty quickly, but it still has features that I think are worth recalling and recommending. Now, I want to stress I had the PlayStation 2 version, and that's the one I played. So I'm really only speaking of the PlayStation 2 version of Two Towers. The other systems I can't speak of if they had the same amount of quality or whether there were drawbacks and things like that, because video games are very particular to the system that they're made with. Final Fantasy, amazingly, in some versions you can do things to characters like bring them back to life, which you can't do in other versions. So there you go. So they're very particular. So I'm only really speaking of the PS2 version. So what's going on? Well, essentially the main body or the main adventure is mostly the films. Basically, they're taking a lot of Fellowship, the Two Towers, and you're playing through the adventure of basically playing as Aragorn or the other characters, slashing and cutting and getting rid of the orcs. Basically, you're saving things, you're saving people, or you're destroying enemies, or you're guarding a position. There's mostly the film, but they do add some new story here and there in little bits and parts. But essentially, you're playing the film in kind of an episodic form. So if you're familiar with the film, then you'll kind of know what you have to do within the adventure. But they do have some complications. You do have to think through your strategies in order to accomplish certain goals. And if you don't do it, you're not going to be able to proceed in the quest. So it's interesting that it does sort of force you to do some solving of riddles and some mysteries you have to clear up. It's not a role-playing game, so it's not at the level of Dragon Warrior or Final Fantasy. Like, they're not entire side quests, but they are integrated into the main game, and that's probably what it seems most people like. However, there's a feature here which I actually found way, way better, because while the main adventure is challenging enough, it took me several weeks and several tries to get through it. With enough tries, you'll get through it. And if you just enjoy playing the game at that level, that's fine. But they have this feature called Saruman's Tower, where essentially you pick a character and you get these floors of the tower of Saruman, and essentially you have to destroy all of the enemies in one floor. Then you proceed upwards, and of course, with each new floor, it becomes more challenging and more challenging and more challenging. That thing was insanely difficult and really tough challenge. I never completed it. I was able to get to level 12, level 13, the 14th floor, and I just couldn't get any further. I mean, they just bring in so many challenges. At first, it's like 1, 2 enemies, then 3 enemies, then 4 enemies, then 5 enemies, then 6. It's just an astonishing, challenging levels that you have to go through to try to get to the end. I never reached the end, but I found that really, really fun. So even if you're done with the main adventure and you're like, oh, I kind of feel bored now, I would say the Saruman Tower feature is really, really enjoyable for myself. It was really challenging. It was really difficult, and it really forces you to think on your feet. And so that part of it, I think, is actually the best part of it. But I'm sure most people will like the adventure part. And I think that was very well done. Now, it didn't force me to rethink the movie very much. I still have my own, it's kind of a very mixed opinion of what Peter Jackson did. I will say, though, that the music of the film it's very well interwoven. And so it gives a lot of the scenes and a lot of the actions and a really extra punch. So I'm not the biggest fan of Howard Shore, but I have to say the film score is really, really well adapted to this version of the video game. Again, I don't know if the other video game systems did as good a job integrating the music, but I think the music was probably one of the strongest parts of just playing with the music. I thought that was amazing. So, again, it's still a little bit cool to the film trilogy, but I have to say the Two Towers video game for PS2, very, very well done. I'm going to give it a 7.5. I'd highly recommend it. By now, it should be fairly cheap to get, and I'm sure you can get it access it through various ways. But again, I played it through the actual PS2 system, so I don't know if that's going to be people's favorite way of experiencing the game. But again, a very good game, highly recommended, and a good addition to kind of the media associated with Lord of the Rings. All right, thanks for listening.